Mims,
Tim,
can you believe we've done 23 episodes of Bold Names?
I genuinely cannot. But I do know that we've covered a lot of ground in that time. AI, robots, defense tech, EVs, the end of the global economic system as we know it, the online sports betting industry, Tubi.
And we're not finished. We're coming back September 12th with new episodes on Fridays, and we'll be on YouTube, so our fans and my mom will be able to see us.
Shout out to moms. Tim, how are we going to celebrate?
Well, how else but a clip show? And we went through the Bold Names archives and picked some favorite moments, the most memorable conversations with guests who really surprised us, really excited us, and we put it all together. Think of it as, now that's what I call Bold Names Volume 1.
We're going to start with Palmer Luckey, the founder and CEO of defense tech company Anduril.
That's next.
First stop on our trip into the Bold Names archives, Palmer Luckey, founder and CEO of weapons manufacturer Anduril. We talk about how Luckey, a longtime supporter of President Trump, is using his influence in both Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. to secure U.S. military contracts while trying to remake the government's approach to national security.
Yeah, this conversation took a few surprising turns. Luckey quoted iconic singer Patti LaBelle. He read us his latest text messages from Elon Musk, and he shared his thoughts on the Black Eyed Peas. Definitely worth checking out the whole interview, but here's one of our favorite clips. Let's get into it.
So while we're talking about these autonomous, flying drones, essentially, obviously those have been hugely important in Ukraine. I mean, a lot of these still are built in China. Yep. The U.S. has had trouble maintaining market share there. The Pentagon's trying to encourage U.S. manufacturing of these really low-cost autonomous munitions in a way. Where are we at? Why can't we maintain any market share there in the U.S.?
There's about a half dozen small drone makers in the U.S. that are building really powerful tools in that category. I think that the problem is that the United States has not really made it part of our procurement strategy to actually use tools like that yet. Like, the reason you see Ukraine using small quadcopters is because they're in a war. They're using whatever they can get their hands on, whatever they can build in country, whatever they can buy from China, and they're strapping grenades to drones and flying them around and blowing them up. The United States, we don't have a program of record for armed quadcopters. There's earlier research and development going on. There are early prototypes of things going on. We're building a larger attack quadcopter that is fitting into a Marine Corps program, for organic precision fires. But again, that's early stages. They're basically at the stage where they're buying hundreds of them to try out with the intent of getting into it later. So I'm actually not too worried on the small quadcopter side. I think the United States is actually doing fine there. Where we really get screwed is on munitions that are a bit harder to build. Things like cruise missiles, things like surface-to-air interceptors. In that case, I mean, you've probably read all the stories. U.S. wargaming results.
We run out in 2 weeks in a fight with China.
It depends on who you ask. There's people who say a day. There's people who say 8 days. There's people who say 2 weeks. But you can see the tenor of it is all the same. And let's say that it is 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pain doesn't mean much to a dictator who thinks in terms of centuries, right? Like, if China believes that we can put up a good fight for a week or two, and then it's going to take us years to rebuild our industrial capacity on the weapons side, I mean that's an easy trade for someone like him to make. Just get through the pain and come out the other side with the world's largest military, by far, standing unopposed, and a U.S. arsenal that is empty.
Okay, we have a new Secretary of Defense, and Pete Hegseth. He recently said, I'm quoting here, "We have some really fast-moving, newer contractors that are willing to work, that have already put a lot of money into R&D, that want to help us rapidly field these new systems that we're going to need for fights in the future."
Yep.
Defense spending is, at this point, given the push toward efficiency, a zero-sum game. It feels like he's talking about some of these other drone makers you just mentioned. Do you see this as a good sign for Anduril, number one? And number two, How can we realize the dream that you just articulated in a world where we're trying to shrink budgets, even the defense budget, it sounds like, or they're looking for efficiencies?
So, to be honest, it's not that hard. We spend so much on so little. We spend so much money on capabilities that are of very little consequence to deterring a conflict with China. Legacy things that made sense when we were investing very heavily in counterterrorism, made a lot of sense when we were imagining that we were going to get into a large scale land war in Europe. I actually think that in a lot of ways, Anduril will do better in a world where defense budgets are going down, because that's when you have to tighten your belt. When your budget is stable or going up, it's easier for people to just keep spending on everything they're already spending on because nobody will complain, and then add even more on top of that. When you're forced to tighten your belt, that's when you start to make trade-offs and say, do I really need to keep, for like, one example is the Marine Corps getting rid of their tanks. And they said, you know what? That's not the future of the Marine Corps, island hopping in the Pacific. Tanks are not going to be part of that. So you know what? We're going to get rid of them. That sent a shockwave through the DoD to have the commandant make that decision. We probably need to make 100 decisions that are just like that, fundamentally recomposing the force, their mission, how we think about deterrence. My ideological view is that the United States should not be the world police. We should be the world gun store. We need to stop sending our people overseas to die for other people's sovereignty. And we need to be willing to sell them the weapons they need to make themselves into prickly porcupines that nobody wants to step on, nobody wants to bite, nobody wants to take a bite of them. That's how I think we're going to help our allies, not just like Ukraine or Israel, but looking at other places that China has on their roadmap, like the Philippines, like South Korea, like Japan. We need to sell them the tools that they need to defend themselves. When you rethink things that way, you say, well, wait, maybe we don't need to budget to have hundreds of thousands of troops that are ready to go fight for this particular country. Maybe we can actually put that money into advanced munitions production of things that are 90% fewer parts, much easier to make, where we can make large quantities of them sufficient to deter a conflict. Maybe we actually can cut defense spending and also get more capability. And I'll finish this rant by saying this, which is I'm actually probably a little bit at odds with some of my Republican colleagues where they're saying, hey, we're at 2.9% of GDP on defense spending. If we're telling the rest of the world that we need to, they need to be at 5%, shouldn't we be at 5% too? I lean more towards, I think we can do it with what we're already spending or less.
That's Anduril CEO Palmer Luckey. One of the lines here that really stood out to me. At one point he said, the US should not be the world police, we should be the world gun store. Tim, we're going to continue along this windy path of geopolitics and hear some of our conversation with Evan Smith, the CEO of a company called Altana. Altana's kind of like LinkedIn, but instead of resumes and grindset posts, it gives its customers insight into the details of their supply chains.
Yeah, and we did this interview at like the perfect time during the peak of the tariff turmoil back in May. At one point, he even told us that a board member at a Fortune 50 company told him that President Trump's Liberation Day was an economic Pearl Harbor. Let's listen.
So now it seems like we're getting a little break from the Liberation Day tariffs. Break, I'm putting in scare quotes. So they've been paused on nearly 100 nations. Are things back to normal? Can we all go home now? Can we end this podcast right here?
Look, even if we got to a place tomorrow where it was like, okay, we're done. Let's go back to the way it was, which that won't happen. But let's just imagine the scenario. We're going to live through what's called a bullwhip effect in the world economy, in the global supply chain, for the next 9 or 12 months. It was such a big shock to the system. So, the logistics providers themselves, where do the containers go? Where are the ships? The distortion to inventories, the distortion to orders. It's this massive shock to the system that's going to reverberate for the rest of the year easily. So even if we just magically kind of went back to the way things were, we'd still be living through that shock. I think the other thing that this did, back to my comment about economic Pearl Harbor, was this really rubbed every board and C-suite nose in the fact that geopolitics are now primary in governing and steering global businesses. So it's not just like the market rationale, who's growing what, where, what products do I need to get where, at what cost, with what distribution networks and supply chains. It's geopolitics front and center. And that's not going to change, right? Like the rules of the game just changed. And what we saw China do in response is they put this gun to our head and said, if you're going to cut off our trade, we're going to cut off your ability to access these critical minerals and magnets. We're going to shut down the most important production chains in your country.
Because those magnets are in motors and all sorts of high value production.
Weapons, motors, semiconductors, advanced electronics, autonomous systems, like all of our information, telecommunication infrastructure. Short of selling our bonds, that was the biggest lever they could pull.
And what do you hear? Half of your business comes from government, presuming a lot of it is the federal government, presuming you're talking with the Trump administration. What are you hearing from the Trump administration?
Yeah, I don't want to be super specific, but yeah,
we like specific here.
Sure.
Please relay your last conversation with Scott Bessent.
I will not. So this, I'm very confident that the effort to refactor the entire global trading system is in the first or second inning, not the ninth.
First or second inning. What? So it just escalates here. More chaos ahead.
It's going to be more of this, big swing here, big announcement there, maybe a precision strike here, and we're in a big negotiation phase where I think the administration is hopeful that enough countries are going to come to the table, willing to make enough sweeping changes that it starts to snowball. Like that's the hopeful scenario. Mm-hmm. And then you can see it going in other ways too, potentially.
So to put a fine point on it, you think there's going to be more big swings as these negotiations play out?
I'm 100% convicted.
Let's go back to where we almost began this conversation, the Golden Arches diplomacy that you kind of referenced. It's almost 30 years ago, globalization was very in vogue, and Thomas Friedman had his Big Mac diplomacy theory, the idea that no two countries that both have a McDonald's have ever fought a war against each other. The idea that free trade would interconnect the world in a way that would prevent armed conflict. Well, in hindsight, that seems maybe idealistic. Why was Thomas Friedman wrong? Why were so many people wrong about this idea that free trade was this kind of ushering in kind of a utopia for the world?
They got it exactly wrong, meaning they confused the causality. Look, the point is that we really came out with this very triumphalist, optimistic, cheerful view that, globalization, free trade was the end state, right? And then what I've unlearned since then, what I've come to realize is that it's literally the opposite. Free trade does not create peace. Peace creates free trade. Peace gives rise to free trade. And we all sort of came of age in an era where we had a unipolar security umbrella provided by the United States, policing all of the waters, right? Maritime security, free trade. That era is over, and now you have Russia asserting itself, Iran asserting itself, and most of all, China asserting itself. And guess what? Now you're seeing the breakdown of the free trading system as those geopolitical interests become primary over the economic interests.
You call it the end of globalization 1.0, I believe.
I do.
That you have a date even. That was Thursday, February 24th, 2022.
That was the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, and then I think the debate was over. That was a McDonald's having nation invading another McDonald's having nation, right?
Evan Smith, CEO of Altana. I think this conversation really stood out to us for a couple of reasons. First is his conviction that our global economic system as we know it will never be the same. Also the fact that he said Thomas Friedman got it exactly wrong about his Golden Arches theory of diplomacy.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, one of the hottest areas in tech right now is humanoid robots. We'll look back on our conversation with Ayanna Howard, a roboticist and the dean at The Ohio State University College of Engineering.
And then, coming up later in the show, we'll hear highlights from our interview with Microsoft AI chief Mustafa Suleyman, who told us why he's skeptical of visions of superhuman AI showing up anytime soon.
I think there's obviously a lot of motivated reasoning if you're fundraising and so on. And look, there are very smart people who I respect deeply who think it is literally imminent.
Stay with us. Now, we're going to hear from Microsoft AI chief Mustafa Suleyman in a bit. But first, we're going to touch on another buzzy industry, humanoid robots. Way back in February, we spoke with Ayanna Howard.
She's a roboticist and the dean at The Ohio State University College of Engineering. She has been working on humanoid robots and the software brains that power them for decades.
Humanoid robots and AI are two of the hottest fields in tech right now. And we try to bring a healthy skepticism to these overhyped industries when we cover them on the show.
We talked about what it would take for the many humanoid robot startups out there now to actually succeed. Let's take a listen.
So suddenly humanoids are the hottest thing in tech other than AI. There are, by my count, more than a dozen startups worldwide that have racked up significant investment to work on these. Some of these startups, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So as in my estimation, the world expert on humanoid robots, who's not already employed by a humanoid robot company, I have to ask, why is this happening now? What is going on?
There's a couple of things. One is that humanoid robots is the next shiny penny that's out there that tech folks and VCs, venture capitalists can invest in. But I think it's also this logical, for those who aren't in robotics, it seems like the next logical step around artificial intelligence and generative AI is, let's think about generative AI with the physical embodiment. And so if I'm thinking about the technology lineage, it's going to be humanoids because generative AI is about human knowledge in a body, human body must be a humanoid. So it's just a natural progression for a non-roboticist to think that way.
Shiny penny. There's clearly a lot of hype in this space right now, and probably no one's bigger at the hype than Tesla's own techno king, Elon Musk. And he's recently saying that he thinks his car company can build 10,000 humanoid robots by the year's end, a goal that he seems to concede they won't meet, but if they get to thousands, he'll be happy. And then there's a company called Figure, which is out recently talking about how it's going to deploy 100,000 robots in the next 4 years. So, generally speaking, where is the technology currently? What are these kinds of humanoid robots capable of doing in reality, in your estimation?
If you think about the abilities of humanoids and what you would like them to do in theory, you like them to go from point A to point B, so navigation. They can do that pretty well, given that you can model the environment. Once they get to another location, you want them to be able to manipulate. So move objects, pick up things, build things, and then go back from B to A or B to C, the last mile, as an example. Now, what they're really...
The last feet,
at least in our human environments. The reality, though, is that just like with self-driving cars, is that they can be very, very, very effective in limited situations, limited environments, limited tasks with, humans not rampant around them. They can be positive, but that's not going to give you a $1 billion valuation of a company.
It feels like these robots are where autonomous cars were, I want to say 10 years ago, but maybe it's more like 20 or 30 years ago. Is that a fair analogy?
I would say that they are at the point when all of the investment incurred, which was, I would say that was about 10 years ago, where startups were just popping up. They were talking about self-driving cars are going to be rampant within the next 24 months, including well-established car companies. And as roboticists, we always like, do you remember that car that drove across America about 40 years ago? Like, that's where we are with humanoid robotics. Like, we've seen humanoid robotics 40, 50 years ago, clunky, not well designed necessarily. And just like with self-driving cars, I always like to think about Hunger Games. There will be a winner at some point. We just don't know, one, who the winner is, and two, what is that application that is going to really set it apart from everyone else.
So the battle for supremacy in humanoid robots is going to be like the Hunger Games, Tim, at least according to roboticist Ayanna Howard. But what do you think?
Well, I'm definitely excited to watch that movie play out. It's been super exciting to see how something very similar occurred in the autonomous car space. We had a number of companies duking it out, and in recent years, a narrowing of the field, those who are really viable at this point, the likes of Waymo and Tesla and Zoox. So I would imagine we're early days right now with humanoid robots, and eventually we're going to start seeing those punches fly. Or at least that would be great for the movie. Now, Mims, let's change gears just a little bit from humanoid robots to something closely related, artificial intelligence. And few people developing AI have as much experience in the field as Microsoft AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman. He co-founded DeepMind, helped Google develop its large language models, and designed AI chatbots at his former startup, Inflection AI.
And now he's leading Microsoft's efforts on its consumer AI products, like Copilot. He's also navigating the company's complicated relationship with OpenAI, one of the biggest dramas in tech right now. Popcorn emoji. We also wanted to know, in a world in which AI will be capable of doing pretty much everything we do, what's left for the humans? We got into all of that in our chat with Microsoft AI chief, Mustafa Suleyman.
In Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, where I'm talking to you from, the big term is artificial general intelligence. AGI is the hot buzzword. Of all the chiefs of AI who are well known, you seem the most skeptical that it's arriving anytime soon. The least interested in it in a way. Why is that?
I don't think I'm skeptical that it's arriving anytime soon. Soon to me is sometime in the next 10 years.
I think some people are saying maybe tomorrow, right?
Well, I think there's obviously a lot of motivated reasoning if you're fundraising and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And look, there are very smart people who I respect deeply who think it is literally imminent. So, look, I guess, like I said earlier, to me, the goal isn't superintelligence for its own sake. Superintelligence is framed as, the moment when an AI is as good as all humans at all tasks. Not just like one human at one task, but like all of us collectively put together, controlling and containing something as powerful as that, just seems like unfathomably complex, and aligning it to our interests and making it really want to care about us enough not to step on us and, squish us. I think the reason I started off in technology and what I'm passionate about is solving hard social problems. I care about healthcare, I care about energy, I care about food systems, I care about education. And these tools are going to transform those industries and genuinely deliver a world of abundance. Like, that is coming. Like in the next 10 or 20 years, I really believe we're going to reduce the cost of energy production to near zero marginal cost, which underpins the cost of everything. I really believe that we are going to have medical superintelligence sometime in the next 2 to 5 years, which means a domain-specific, contained, aligned medical expert that can diagnose any condition and can orchestrate care in real live clinical settings. And that, to me, is the true prize. That's why we're working on this. That's what I call humanist superintelligence. And that's probably why you find me more focused on those things rather than on sort of AGI or superintelligence for its own sake.
That reminds me a lot of one of your colleagues and how he likes to talk about the immediate future. And that's, of course, Sam Altman. Our colleagues at the Journal have reported on what feels like a healthy rivalry at Microsoft. Some of your teams involving, the partnership with OpenAI. There's a lot of big personalities involved. There's very high stakes. Are we seeing kind of the same kind of creative friction that we've seen in other partnerships in the past? Or, what's going on there where you have this partnership with the leading AI lab, but you're building AI and you're using their tools at the same time? It seems very complicated.
I mean, look, first of all, this partnership is going to go down as one of the most successful for both sides in technology history. Over the last 6 years, both companies have blossomed, and it's going to continue for many years to come, at least until 2030, and hopefully way beyond that. Look, we are a $3 trillion company, and at one level, AI is unquestionably the future of the technology industry that Microsoft has formed and shaped over the last 50 years. So, as much as we are a partnership-based company that is a platform of platforms, we also have to be AI self-sufficient in many ways too. So, look, it's a great partnership. It's going to continue. There's always going to be creative friction. They build and sell APIs, as well as obviously chatbots. And we do the same. So there's some tension, but fundamentally, we're really all trying to compete against Google and against Meta and all of the others.
Does that mean building your own frontier foundation models?
I don't know about frontier, but we've definitely been developing our own models for many years. They tend to be SLMs, mid-sized models, so small language models and mid-sized models. But just having the know-how to be able to build models for our products, for our use cases, this is a big priority for us.
I'm so fascinated with the relationship between OpenAI and Microsoft. I'm curious, how often do you talk to Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI?
Pretty frequently, all the time. I mean, he's a big part of the Microsoft ecosystem, and we're all in constant contact, including with Satya and the rest of the team.
What's most impressed you by him, or what's most frustrated you by him?
I think he's a brilliant visionary, and ChatGPT has been an incredible success. I think he's very good at letting lots of flowers bloom and then making sure that he bets on the right ones. In the years running up to 2020, they were betting on games and simulations and robotics and lots of different methods, and they let those die quickly and at the right pace in order to make the bet on GPT-2 and GPT-3, and I think they did that incredibly well.
Yeah, I'd read the other day the information. I recently had a report that said OpenAI is working to develop its own workplace programs like Word to allow users to collaborate, and that kind of feels like that's getting into Microsoft space. What do you think of such moves by your partner?
I think it's great. Like, they are an independent company. We happen to own a large chunk of them. But we compete with them. They compete with us. When they're successful, we're successful because we own a big chunk of them. So we have no influence on what products they do or don't make. They are entirely independent, and they're free to build whatever they want.
That said, there is this just really fascinating contract that OpenAI has with you, which I've never understood this. Apparently it stipulates that if they achieve AGI, then they are no longer have an exclusive deal with you. Is that true? Like, are you waiting for them to achieve AGI and then it's sayonara?
Look, it's a complicated structure, and you have to understand how visionary and ahead of its time it was. It was very hard for anyone to predict back in 2019, 2020, how fast this would go. So I think there's a lot to work through, and I think the teams have been working hard on figuring out the next versions of the contract. I'm sure we'll get through it.
Well, Mims, it's complicated.
Yeah, as Suleyman said, it's a complicated structure. And he's also in the odd position of running Microsoft's internal AI development while sort of competing with OpenAI, which Microsoft, meanwhile, is heavily invested in.
And it's interesting. He says he's focused on reaching what he calls humanist superintelligence rather than superintelligence for its own sake.
Humanist superintelligence. We're going to take another quick break, but when we come back, we'll hear highlights from our conversation with Peter Jackson, not the filmmaker, the CEO of Flutter Entertainment. That's the parent company of online sports betting giant FanDuel. Really excited to listen to some of that conversation again. It got pretty spicy.
Then later in the show, we'll look back on our interview with Sarah Guo, the founder of venture capital firm Conviction. We talked about how she's finding opportunities in a new generation of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and what that looks like.
I think it's actually just stylistic because these people are like amazing professionals.
So they're like, I got $1 million contract, bro.
Something like that, except I would need to Urban Dictionary the words, right? Yeah.
That's next.
This next conversation really offered a lot of surprises. I don't think we went into looking at the online sports betting industry through a tech company lens. But that changed when we spoke with Peter Jackson, the CEO of FanDuel parent Flutter Entertainment. FanDuel is the biggest U.S. company in sports betting by revenue. Even if you don't care about sports, his industry is transforming the U.S. It's also at the center of its fair share of controversy.
Yeah, we wanted to know, how is Flutter capitalizing on the rapid rise of legalized online gambling in the U.S.? Is the sports betting boom sustainable? And is it really all just clean fun? Or are states opening the gates to potential harms? Let's take a listen.
Clearly, like you just said, the data matters. Of course, you are a business, right? I mean, according to our own reporting, I think people lose on average 7.5 cents on every dollar they bet with you, right? The house always wins. But how do you keep people coming back when, on average, you have the problem that every gaming business has, which is that clearly you're making money overall, and they're losing it to you?
We're in the entertainment business. I mean, the business is called Flutter Entertainment, and I'll tell the story. I mean, I get in a cab, right, and the guy says to me, "What do I do?" And I tell them I work for FanDuel, and he's like, "Oh my God, you can't believe what happened at the weekend. I had my parlay bet on, and 6 legs clicked, and the 7th leg didn't." He said, "I had $10 down, and if only that player had gone 5 more yards, I would have won 100%." He said, "I've been telling everyone about it, right?" They'd had so much entertainment from it, right? And that's what it's about. Now, sometimes they win, sometimes they lose those parlay bets. But in the end, this is about entertainment. This is not about making a living for them. But you get much better value from the money you're spending with us than you do going to the cinema, right? Where it's a sort of been and gone experience, right? You get to tell your friends about it. You can share it on social media. People love sharing their wins. They love sharing the ones that they almost won. So that's what we bring. We bring excitement to life for people.
So sports betting's definitely better than going to a movie.
Well, if you're asking me, of course it is.
You talked about being, part of the entertainment business. One of the things about the evolution of the entertainment business, of course, is that it's so much of it's being delivered right through these. I'm holding up my phone for those of you who can't see it, which is everyone right now. In some ways, it's a more potent delivery device, right? That's the flip side of it being accessible. And so, there's this kind of growing literature on how we have to be careful because it's with us all the time, right? So psychiatrist Anna Lemke, she has this great book called Dopamine Nation. She calls so much of what gets delivered through our phone a digital drug. And so many of the kind of safeguards that you talk about putting in place, I mean, they do remind me of like responsible drinking campaigns or, the regulations that were put on companies like Juul, for example, about not advertising to young people. I mean, is it fair to say that in the same sense that social media is a digital drug, that this is a digital drug and we should acknowledge that and sort of regulate it accordingly?
We are regulated. I think unlike the social media businesses, we're very heavily regulated on a state by state basis in the US, and on a sort of country by country basis elsewhere. And there are a lot of sort of customs and practices we have to adhere to make sure that our customers are well protected in that sort of operating environment. And I think that there are some therefore important distinctions between what we do and what some of the sort of social media and other digital businesses are doing.
I don't know, Mims. What do you think? Is sports betting better than going to a movie? Peter Jackson says it is.
Maybe if it's between that and seeing Jurassic World Rebirth.
Or Megan 2.0, which, funny enough, continues the story of AI gone rogue in the form of a creepy robot doll.
Tim, that's a great segue to our next and last clip.
Yeah, AI is one of the sexiest topics in tech. And Sarah Guo, the founder of venture capital firm Conviction, is eyeing and investing in companies that use AI for boring business tools.
Guo is a rising star among investors, and she gave us some surprising insight into young founders today, and also the politicization of Silicon Valley. At one point, she told us that the Overton window of what you can express as a tech person and venture capitalist has opened dramatically over the last 5 years, which you'd know if you spent any time at all on X.
We really wanted to know, in a world where big-name AI companies are getting all of the attention and seemingly all of the investment dollars, what are the areas of undiscovered opportunities? Let's take a listen.
When I think about some of these younger founders that I talk to, there's really this incredible before and after, generationally, a lot of it because of the pandemic and how just central that was to a lot of people's experience. And I'm just curious, have you witnessed this? Do you feel like there are significant differences in the younger generation of founders now who you are talking to in any way, like in terms of their priorities or the technologies they're focused on or anything else?
Absolutely. But it's really hard for me to tell if that's just because I'm becoming an old. You know what I mean? I'm like, were they always like this? Or is it just like I'm getting very ornery? We work with several sets of dropouts. I can describe them now. So there's a company called Sola that does business process automation. So for example, in a freight brokerage company, you have to move a lot of paper around between different systems to take a load from a shipper to its destination. And it would be nice if more of that happened automatically. The founders are MIT dropouts. So they're in their very early 20s. I'm trying to remember if they could drink when we first backed the company. And I think the answer is no, or at least one of them could not, which amused me. But I'd say, we're not backing every random set of dropouts, right? Happens very
Can't have
rarely.
an Ivy League dropout on your table and automatically get funding from you?
No.
Not anymore.
No, it's well, I don't know. It's a pretty heated time, but no, not for us. And I think the ambition and capability and strategic thinking, they happen at all different ages. And this is funny because this is an enterprise software company, right? We're selling to we're selling business software to enterprises to improve their operations efficiency, which is not
as 20-somethings are wont to do. Yeah,
it's uncommon versus let me start a consumer social thing for my friends on campus, right? And so I think the surprise to me from a behavior perspective might just be me growing old, which is the communication can be quite casual. But I think it's actually just stylistic because these people are amazing professionals.
So they're I got $1 million contract, bro.
Something like that, except I would need to Urban Dictionary the words. Right?
Well, I don't even know if we're, Mims, I don't know even know if we're talking about age young, but we're talking about almost a new generation of entrepreneurs who, you go back 10 years ago, were excited about the potential of the app economy, a potential of what mobile was doing. So we saw a lot of app-based businesses, whether it was Uber or Instagram or whatnot, kind of coming out of that. But now, I feel like we're seeing a lot of AI, but we're also seeing a lot of maybe hard science kind of businesses that are inspired by the likes of SpaceX and the defense company Anduril. And this idea of changing the world in like the literal sense of the world. Are you seeing those kinds of pitches in your life?
Software can change the world, Tim. Come on.
Absolutely. I take that back.
But if you are, I believe that so genuinely, so I'm willing to say it. But if you are asking, like, do we see companies that are doing hard sciences beyond, computer engineering? Absolutely, right? So we work with a company in the consumer robotics space. They are young, PhDs and PhD dropouts, and yet I'm so comfortable saying that they are, world experts in what they do, and like it's in the pedigree, right? Like Tesla and DeepMind and whatever else. But it's characteristic of the fact that one thing that might be really impressive to me as I become more of an old is, people start their journey into becoming a world expert at a very early age, right? Where I'm like, at 16, I'm like hostessing at Outback Steakhouse. And I still had what I would consider to be like a very specific childhood where I went to the startup office every day.
It's interesting that this kind of cohort of folks who've come up watching the SpaceXs and the Teslas of the world rise up, they came up in a kind of an era of cheap money too, very low interest rates that pushed a lot of investors to kind of gamble on these big bets as they chased returns that they probably weren't getting through the traditional means, right? Now, I don't know if we'll ever see cheap money again. Probably, well, probably will, but not right now. How does that change the ambitions, or are they even able to chase those same kind of dreams in the same way that we saw 10 years ago? What's the advice you'd give to somebody like that?
Call me, right? No, I had to say it. I'm sorry. If you're really good at this, call me. I think that you absolutely have there are drivers and drags. And then when you look at early stage venture, the capital markets of investors who invest in early stage venture funds is very deep. I was not aware how deep until the last few years. And, you have huge amounts of inflow into mostly a series of AI companies. But there are other real drags, like, as you mentioned, there's not been a lot of liquidity, like outcomes from technology companies. First, because there was amongst other things, a very challenging M&A environment for a while. And then also, we have been waiting for companies to go public. But Figma filed, Corey went public. We should expect more here. I'm optimistic. It's tough for an asset class to have only money going in and, very little coming out over a long period of time. And so you should imagine that to have some tightening effect. But on the other hand, I actually think that's washed out by a belief across many investors, including the early stage VCs themselves and the people who back them, that technology's impact on the world is broader and broader and the outcomes are bigger and bigger. And the existence proof of Tesla and OpenAI and SpaceX and these companies, I think that there will be people who take those risks. So people should go for it.
Just do it.
Just do it, Tim. Go ahead, take some inspiration from today's young founders.
Well, we are doing it. We're podcasting.
We are. It's been a journey. Anyway, we're going on YouTube starting next month.
The fans will be able to see us. I'm sorry.
Fans, you're going to see what I see every time we do a recording. Get ready. So, Tim, in addition to small screen stardom, what are you looking forward to most in this new era of bold names?
Hot takes and surprising insights from some of the biggest names in business, of course. What about you?
Merch. You guys listen enough? I'll do a merch drop, I swear.
Okay, well, thanks for taking a walk down memory lane with us. That's Bold Names for this week. We'll be back with new episodes on Fridays starting September 12th.
And as you've heard, we're going to video. Check us out on YouTube and subscribe to WSJ Podcasts.
Our producer is Danny Lewis. We had additional help this week from Ariana Asperu and Kasha Brusalian.
Our fact checker is Aparna Nathan. Michael Laval and Jessica Fenton are our sound designers. Jessica also wrote our theme music.
Our supervising producer is Catherine Millsop. Our development producer is Aisha Al-Muslim. Scott Salloway and Chris Zinsley are the deputy editors, and Falana Patterson is the Wall Street Journal's head of news audio.
For even more, check out our columns on WSJ.com. We've linked them in the show notes.
I'm Tim Higgins.
And I'm Christopher Mims. Thanks for listening.